Now that we understand the basics of strategy and the definition of strategy, let's dive a little bit deeper to understand more of the requirements and the nuances. Strategy is all about looking to the long term and building a business strategy and a plan that can sustain and outlast competitors. So a strategy needs to understand that competition is a long-term game. It's not the next quarter or the next year or the next bonus cycle. Strategy is usually 3, 5, 10 years out at a minimum. Strategy is protecting that special sauce that makes an organization powerful and unique. So for an organization to protect that asset, they have to identify it. And that's why going through the strategy exercise on at least an annual basis is so important, to look and get everyone's opinion to understand, is this really what we're best at, and how do we build around it and strengthen that critical component. And as we have alluded to as well, an organization in their strategy review process must ensure that they have the people, the capabilities, the function, the talent, the expertise in place to make sure that this core competency is maintained. If you have a fantastic organization, but every couple months the entire team turns over, you're not going to sustain that core competency. So organizations need to be very mindful and thoughtful about protecting this incredible asset they have. But first they have to recognize it is their asset. Strategy must also include a continuous improvement review to ensure that the strategy is being reviewed, assessed, adapted, adjusted, not too often, but often enough when there's structural and material changes, competitive environment, or the organization, or some other environmental factor. The organization can't just hope that the strategy that worked last year is going to continue to work this year and the next 10 years. Michael Porter was one of the original experts who made strategy such an important topic in businesses today. Here we're going to go over a few of his key ideas that help us understand strategy and improve it in our organizations. So Michael Porter says the following pieces about strategy. Like we just talked about, it must have a minimum timeline of at least 3 to 5 years, and that's the very bare minimum. Strategy also involves choices. While there are many great options on what businesses to pursue, which opportunities to pursue, real strategy is saying no and knowing what you'll say no to. You can't just start shooting off no and think, I'm strategic now. No, you have to understand, here's what we're always going to say yes to, here's what we're going to avoid. Even though there might be great options, they're just not for us, and they're not going to be the best path because it doesn't involve our core competency. Yes, we can make money in the short term, but long term, it's just going to take too much to pursue. And then Michael Porter's last point is that strategy must work together with the organization to form something known as fit. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later into this course after we cover execution. So once an organization has a strategy and they have their execution components and they have their core capabilities, they have to ensure like a puzzle, all the pieces work together. You can't just throw everything to a salad bowl, mix it together, and say it's a 5-course meal. It's not. It has to work all together and be interlocking. So that's what we're going to get to. And Michael Porter was smart enough to recognize that efficiency or doing things well isn't enough to run a profitable business, right? So take, for example, the piece I have here on the slide where, say you're in the computer business and you can create the best computer and you can sell it for $100. Well, that doesn't matter if you're really good at creating great computers if it winds up costing you $110 to get it to the consumer and it arrives 3 weeks late. You're only getting one piece of the puzzle right, and long term and short term this is unprofitable. So you have to identify that perfect sweet spot to make strategy effective. Too many organizations get comfortable thinking what they know is all there is to know. So Michael Porter is a big fan of having organizations discuss strategy, bring it into the operating structure of the organization, and making sure the whole management team, not just executives, but directors, managers, even employees know what an organization is doing to satisfy each of these strategic components and to communicate the strategy. If you're, say, sailing a ship, how will you get to your destination if you don't know where you're going? That is what strategy and execution do. They help you identify your target so that everyone can get on board and get there when you're supposed to. If you're like me and you've worked in organizations for enough time, you'll have seen that many strategies are bewilderingly confusing and complex, and that's even if you're able to see them and understand them. Too often organizations put piles of stuff into binders and then call it a strategy. Well, if no one can understand it, no one can see it, no one can read it, what's the point? Well, you're just creating mess, you're not creating strategy. Michael Porter emphasizes that strategy must be simple and unambiguous for all to understand. If the person working on the loading dock doesn't understand the strategy, that's not a good thing. Because if he doesn't get it, there's probably a lot of other people in the middle leading up to the executive decision-making team who don't get it. And that's just bad news to the organization. Best-in-class organizations understand that doing something is not the same as doing the right thing. So organizations need to ensure that people throughout the organization understand which decisions to make. Say, if only the organization's executives understand what they'll say yes and no to, that's not effective either, because they don't make all the day-to-day decisions. The people who do are the managers, the supervisors, the employees, the directors. They're the people who make decisions day-to-day and need to be able to work together and as a team and as a unit say yes and no to the right and wrong things.